Hey guys.
Hello, Senator.
Sorry about the Twins, everybody.
Oh, there it is. We got your question.
What about those White Sox?
That's what I'm talking about.
Nice.
How about Tommy? You know, Tommy's a supporter too. His wife was at a fundraiser
The old
of mine,
guy
so I
had
was
one left in him.
I was just so proud of him. It was just great. Griffey making that.
All right,
throw.
we're
What
done
about
now.
these Minnesota
Thanks.
Twins? I mean, these Minnesota
Thanks
Twins.
a lot.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. guys.
It was a great game.
It was a
however.
great game, though. I mean, both teams played great. It was just a great team.
So you've got Milwaukee, Minnesota, Chicago. You got two teams.
We got two. I'm telling you, crosstown series.
Senator, I know our time is limited. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
You're going back to Washington.
Right.
You're going to vote tonight on the bailout package. A lot of people in Minnesota, we hear, are opposed to it.
Right.
Congressmen and women say 100 to 1 against. Why would you vote yes?
Well, you know, this is one of those situations where, as frustrating as it is, we've got to look at the big picture. We should have never been in this mess in the first place. A year ago, I said we needed stronger regulations on Wall Street. 2 years ago, I said we've got to look at this subprime lending crisis and prevent it from spreading. Unfortunately, we are now in a situation where there is a risk of a financial meltdown that would affect ordinary people on Main Street. The small business owner can't make payroll on Friday, or you can't make a car loan, which means that suddenly the dealership starts closing up. And you could have a ripple effect that would lead us into a deep, deep recession. So here's what I think has to be described. If we do this properly, taxpayers should get their money back. We're going to be buying bad assets, but when the market recovers, we sell them back. And what I've committed to is that as president, if there are any losses, we're going to make sure that the financial sector plugs that hole so that taxpayers get their money back. But what we can't do is afford a wildfire that could end up having a disastrous effect on our economy.
Well, Americans don't seem to believe, in fact, that this is going to hurt. The stock market snapped back, and economists are saying that this might not be a bad thing for them.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where let's say you had a 25 or a 50% chance that something really bad happens, and maybe it doesn't. We need to take out some insurance to ensure that it doesn't. Keep in mind that if we do this right, we may not even end up having to spend all this money, but what we're doing is we're providing authorization so that the Treasury is in a position to prevent some very bad things to happen. This is the kind of thing that happened in the Great Depression, where once credit locks up, it ends up having impacts on businesses all across the country. We've got to ensure against that happening.
My question is about specifically to Minnesota. Living in the Twin Cities, we see ads every day for John McCain. We haven't seen any from Barack Obama. Are you taking Minnesota for granted?
I would never take Minnesota for granted. First of all, Mayor Ryback was one of my earliest supporters. He was part of the draft Obama movement before I'd even initially announced. I will say that we're trying to spread the electoral map, and we're going into a lot of non-traditional states, Virginia, North Carolina, places that historically Democrats haven't won before. And so it is probably true that in September we've been spending more time in those states. In October, we'll make sure to get to Minnesota. We'll make sure that we're campaigning actively because I think people in Minnesota want change as desperately as people everywhere else.
Senator, you mentioned in your speech that you were willing to cut agricultural subsidies. Could you be more specific, and is ethanol on the table?
Well, what I've said is that we have to cut subsidies to agribusiness, and that's why I think it's important for us to have a cap on these subsidies, put more of that help into family farmers who have fortunately seen some higher prices this year. On the other hand, if you're looking at dairy farmers, their feed prices as well as their inputs and fuel costs have pretty much offset higher food prices, higher grain prices. So I want the subsidy system to work for the families that need it. I don't want them to be subsidizing enormous multi-billion-dollar corporations that are doing just fine without them.
Is ethanol on the table?
I think what we have to do on ethanol is to start shifting towards cellulosic ethanol. I come from a corn state, and ethanol has allowed us to put an infrastructure together for alternative fuels. It has been extraordinarily helpful for the rural economy, so I'm going to continue to support ethanol. But what I want to do is to start transitioning to the kind of cellulosic ethanol that is more energy efficient and is more likely to be really useful over the long term.
Senator, CBS News has done a series of interviews with Sarah Palin in which she made some very controversial remarks about foreign policy, about abortion, about popular culture. Is she qualified to be President of the United States?
Well, I think, it's good that she's doing interviews because it gives voters a chance to make that assessment. That's not my job. Obviously, I'm on the other side. I'm running against John McCain for president, so you're not going to get an objective view from me. But what I will say is this, that my guy, Joe Biden, is absolutely qualified to be vice president. He is somebody who has great expertise in foreign policy, who's been fighting on all kinds of domestic issues, everything from writing the crime bill to the Violence Against Women Act. So I have a lot of confidence in him. I think the American people will have to judge whether they think the Republican VP nominee is.
Should they be concerned about the things she's saying?
Well, I think her interviews speak for themselves, and I think people should all take a look at them. They're on YouTube, I believe.
Senator, just following up, you propose middle-class tax cuts.
Yeah.
There's a bailout package that's going on.
Yeah.
You're also proposing, you talked about a lot of other spending proposals out there. How do you balance the budget? We're in a record deficit right now. How do you balance the budget?
Well, look, we're not going to balance the budget next year or even the year afterwards. What we have to do is to just stop the bleeding. We've got to stop digging the hole. So what I've said is I'm absolutely committed to pay-go principles. What that means is you don't start a new program unless you've cut an old program. You don't do anything you can't pay for. And so we will be living within our means, but what we can't do is close all of the hole that we've gotten ourselves into over the last 8 years overnight. It would be too drastic. And there's some core investments that we have to make, particularly on things like energy. So what we'll be doing is, first of all, making sure that the deficit's not increasing, and then over the course of 4 years under my administration, slowly reducing it, ending the war in Iraq, ending subsidies to insurance companies under the Medicare program that are unnecessary. We can save billions of dollars in that way. Over time, the deficit should be reduced.
And do you have a timeline scheduled? I mean,
well,
you could say it's balanced by.
I mean, sometimes politicians play those games. They're based on projections that you can manipulate. They're not realistic. What I just insist on is that my goal is that we start living within our means. That's what we did under the last Democratic administration. I hope to return to that principle.
Very harsh ads in Minnesota.
Thanks.
McCain.
We're out of time.
Saying you're phoning it in.
Yeah. Sorry.
What about those?
Oh, he's been running a lot of ads that are not accurate and are nasty, and they don't seem to have worked.
Senator Obama.